Well, thank you. This has been really very rich. What my takeaway from this is that we actually need a new deal for cities. When I first knew what the topic was, I sort of thought, okay, what can I actually learn about density that I don't already know? And I think what really came out for me is the link between the importance, the role that cities play, and what's lacking now in the potential for cities. So that what I mean by a deal for cities is I think we need to, first of all, what I think Alan Broadbent raised, a very important thing, is we actually need to change our relationship to the federal and provincial. We need to actually have more sort of control over our destiny, and that is primarily financial. And we also, as I think others have talked about, is that the creative aspect of it. I think in order for those creative ideas that Trevor Bodie and others talked about, we need to really, start developing much more innovative ways of doing it. And I think it has to be at the local level. Now, I really do listen to Bill Rees because he's a professor emeritus in our department, and he's drilled in us. We're all real good ecological footprint practitioners here. That we actually, not just the city, it has to be the regional city-state. So we actually are talking about a larger region. So right now, Vancouver itself is not doing really well about, yes, we may be doing density, but we're not really good about addressing affordability. I mean, so it's going out to the other regions. We need to be addressing those kinds of really critical issues and on a regional scale. We need to be talking about food production on a regional scale, food, all of those, food distribution, all of those critical things we need to be doing in a regional scale. And again, we need that kind of redefinition and different political jurisdictions and control. And I think that also, when I was thinking about the fourth wave, I was, I think the fourth wave is about this New Deal, but I think it's also a New Deal for the young and the New Deal for families as well. I mean, I think we have to think about where is our future generation going to be living and flourishing.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So, if ideas were calories, I think most of us would be loosening our belts. It's been a great feast. Compliments to the chef. And my taste buds just started to salivate right at the beginning with Professor Lightbody talking about the third wave, and mentioned it was due to a great extent around reaction to freeways. And I hear that a lot, of course, around here. The freeway, not mythology, the reality of stopping it is now part of our collective memory. But I hadn't heard it from an Albertan. And it just reminded me that, well, that was significant. And it was 40 years ago, 1972. Oh, and here's a fun fact. Mass motorization is said to occur when a society reaches 400 vehicles per 1,000 population. That happened in the US in 1958. Canada, 1972. That was the year we killed the freeway dead, just at the point where we reached mass motorization. So 40 years, we've had to take the other options seriously. Other transportation options, a land use plan that reflects that. 40 years later, we're a world leader. And when we look out to the future, interesting, I think, analogously to the Bartholomew Plan, which shaped much of mid-century Vancouver, what Patrick Condon was putting forward, I think will prevail, if not for other good reasons, by default. There's no other vision. It's the one that we will implement so long as it seems to work for us, because no one is putting forward any other serious proposal, at least insofar as the part of the region that most of us live in. But critically, Penny, you've touched on it, Lance, this isn't where the region's going to be shaped. Where, if not done, our form, we have a pretty clear sense of. It's going to be south of the Fraser. So I don't know, can we get lights up? I'd love to know how many people in this room are for south of the Fraser. Hands up. 1, 2, 3. I mean, we can practically count them on one hand. And I want to know who the decision makers are, the people who really are going to shape our region. Because it isn't the politicians necessarily, they vote, and it won't necessarily be the planners or the engineers, even within the municipalities. It will be the people who move stuff and have access right into the top echelons of senior governments. It's Metro Port Vancouver. Anyone here from them? Do we have anyone on the board of Metro Port Vancouver? Of YVR? Do we have BC Trucking? BCAA? Do we have anybody who really is making the decisions about shaping this region in this room? In a few hours, I'm going to be going to talk about the Port Pattullo Bridge. TransLink has let go of its strategic planner. It's dismantled its transportation and land use arm. It doesn't have money for taxi shares. It's not going to proceed with transit south of the Fraser. There won't be express buses crossing the Port Mann when it opens. But somehow it has money to study the Pattullo Bridge. So I think the future of this region is not going to be shaped in Vancouver, and it won't be shaped in the traditional places we look to. It's going to be shaped by the people who aren't in this room, who still have a vision of mass motorization and a world that ended in 1972.
Wow.
Oh, hard acts to follow. I have to say, if Bill Reese is the fifth wheel in this day, I'm not quite sure what I am. I think I'm the least qualified person to grace the stage today. My own research is not in urban design, but I would like to thank everybody who participated today and who I've been exposed to in the last 2 years in Vancouver for an incredible education on this topic. I believe the reason I am here, however, is not only because of my position as the director of the school, but I am very interested in how we communicate messages, both verbally and graphically. So I would like to thank all the speakers today, essentially without exception, for their fabulously articulate presentations, but also like to make a comment about the mind-numbing graphics, which we have been exposed to the day long. I believe this is actually a really important topic because we in this room are, I'm guessing, fairly like-minded, and we are trying to communicate with other people about these important ideas. There's obviously a lot of convergence of opinion from the experts that you've heard today, and I believe there's plenty of good design talent in the city. So what's the problem? Why aren't these changes taking place when there's such a convergence of ideas about what needs to happen? I think that the biggest challenge that we face is an obvious one. It's profoundly changing the mindset of people affected by these decisions. Now, that might sound like an obvious thing to say, but let me elaborate on it a little bit. I've been thinking all day today about my teacher, George Lakoff. He's a professor at Berkeley, now a quite famous linguist and best-selling author, who wrote a very important book many years ago called Metaphors We Live By. And Lakoff argues that we are unable to think about abstract values like love, freedom, happiness, without making metaphorical relationships to concrete things that we experience in an embodied way. So we, I think, are still dealing with very old metaphors, the metaphors that prevailed when the 19th century walking city in North America got turned inside out. Values such as freedom equals movement. Think of these as metaphors or paradigms, if you want. Freedom as movement, freedom as individual will, bigger is better. And I believe that until we change these paradigms or change the metaphors that we use, and this involves changing the language that we use, we will not be able to see a change in mindset. So I think we need to be much more precise in our language. I think I agree very much with what Shauna was saying about the discussion needs to shift away from statistics and all this fantastic information we got today toward a discussion of values. And I want to just emphasize, I mean that in the most profoundly, deeply held values, not, I think we talk about that in these discussions a little bit too lightly, making friendly streets for people and so on, but really what are the values that we're trying to promote? That's the discussion I think we need to have. So thank you. I'll pass this over.
So we give Gil Peñalosa the final word because he's seen cities all over the world and you've seen conferences as well. So thanks for your final word.
Well, basically, I think that I have been on all sides. I've been in the private sector, I've been in the public sector. Now I'm more in the NGO. I'm really happy that people are talking about these issues because maybe 20 years ago, people were not talking too much about it, but now everybody's talking about it. But I also think that we need to go way beyond talking and doing. And the reality is that this is not a financial issue or a technical, it's a political. So we gotta act. I think that we need almost like a three-legged stool. One of the legs are the elected officials. Elected officials at the municipal level, at the provincial level, at the federal level. Another leg as the city staff, but not only city staff from planning, but from everywhere, from transportation, from the environment, from public health, from education, from everywhere. And the third leg is the community. And the community includes the NGOs, the media, the business, and so on. And I think that we need the three moving in the same direction. That's why we need to develop that sense of urgency. I think that we need more people in government that actually get things done. You know, the reality is that when we work in the government, we got to be reminded that every other week, the citizens are paying us to get things done, not to find 20 reasons why things cannot be done. And I think that we really need people that find solutions to the problems. And we have seen in cities, for example, New York, to give you an example. 10 years ago, people said nothing can happen in New York because of the politicians and the taxes and the corruption and the mafia and so on. All of a sudden, you get these two women, Janet Sari-Khan, Commissioner of Transportation, Amanda Burden, Commissioner of Planning, and they are transforming the city. All of a sudden, they are widening the sidewalks, they are changing the intersections, they are making pedestrian Times Square. I mean, if 5 years ago you would have told anyone in New York that Times Square was going to be pedestrian, they would have thought you were crazy. Well, they did it. They made it pedestrians, and they are building bikeways all over the city and so on. Chicago, there is a new mayor in Chicago. In his first 30 days, he built the first protected bikeway. In his first 30 days. And now he's doing 100 miles, so 160 kilometers of protected bikeways. And they're going through an economic crisis. They're having these issues. I think, for example, Vancouver is an ideal city for cycling if it creates a network of protected bikeways. Not just one bikeway. One bikeway is the same thing as nothing. Because people are not going to use it if part of your ride is going to be safe by the other part is in the middle of the cars and the trucks. So you need to build a grid, a complete grid. I mean, cities much poorer than Vancouver, Seville, Spain, 4 years ago, no one bike. No one bike is 0.2%. So not even 0.5%. They built a grid of 150 kilometers of protected bikeways, and all of a sudden it went from 0.2 to 7%, and they want to go to 15% by 2015. So these are some of the things that we are doing. Politicians, sometimes they are very timid because they don't want to be pioneers because the pioneers get shot in the back. no need to worry because now they're going to be pioneers. There are many cities doing a lot of interesting things around the world. So we got to see, it's not to copy. No, this is not like on the computer that you copy and paste. No, it's how to adapt and improve. So I think that there are lots of really good examples. And I think that Vancouver really could build on a lot of wonderful things that Vancouver has, but go beyond that. Also, it's not just the downtown core, because all of a sudden, people used to say, oh no, you know, it doesn't matter, we can have a horrible city center as long as the suburbs work. Or now it's the other way around. We can have a wonderful city center and horrible suburbs. No, you gotta have both working, otherwise things are not gonna click. And the last comment I wanna make is that we need to develop that sense of urgency. I mean, in Canada, we're gonna grow by the equivalent, we're gonna build the equivalent of the 5 largest cities in the country in the next 25 years. I live in Toronto. The extended Toronto area is gonna grow by 50% in the next 20 years. The extended from Oshawa to Niagara, we got 7.5 million people. In 20 years, we're gonna have 11.2 million. 50%. If we had a magic wand and we could redo half of Toronto, even the best half, we could do it even better. If we knew of the sense of urgency. But every time, we cannot even blink, because when we blink, there is a new neighborhood. And we gotta do it right. And unfortunately, many times we're not doing it right. And one last comment that deals with all of you, because you are paying for it. When I say it's not about the money, and it's not just the current mayor that we have that is really horrible. I love Canada. I became Canadian. I have dual, and the only thing I'm not about Canadian is that I'm not politically correct. But the former administration, one day they came out with a transit plan that it will cover all of Toronto, $6 billion. And everybody said, that's great, but where are you going to get $6 billion? They thought the mayor was crazy. Well, a few weeks later, they come up and they say, we're going to extend the subway in the north of Toronto, 8 kilometers. That doesn't connect anything with anything. $2.6 billion. Who's paying it? 1/3 the city, 1/3 the province, 1/3 all of you, Canada. And it's not going to solve. Could you imagine with those 2.6, we would have had 40% of Transit City already under construction. So that's the kind of thing that I'm saying. It's not about the money. I mean, we could have done the best light rail transit for those 8 kilometers, and we would have money left over to do protected byways in the entire extended GTA. You know, in Toronto, a pedestrian gets hit by a car every 3.5 hours. A cyclist every 7 hours and 10 minutes. And there is not one single politician that is the champion of the pedestrians, or the champion of the cyclists, on the safety point of view. You know, today, 3,500 people died in the world. Tomorrow, another 3,500 in traffic accidents. 1.3 million according to the World Health Organization. And we know what needs to be done, such as lowering the speed, such as making the corners 90 degrees, such as having the lights for pedestrians go ahead of. So, why is it, you know, last year 80,000 pedestrians in the US were hit by cars, reported to the police. So I do think that we can do a lot. We should be doing a lot. The citizens can no longer be spectators. We had to send letters to the editor, go to the public meetings, participate in politics, go to the radio stations, and we need to elect people that really are champions, that are finding solutions to the problems and not problems to the solutions. So I wish you all the very best.
Thank you, Gil. Yes, all right. Okay. Leslie, would you like to say one more thing?
I would like to just say one more thing, if I'm not testing your patience too much. I am lucky to have grown up in a great city called Berkeley, which led the way in many, many important, massive changes, including being parts of movements that many of you took part in, I'm sure yourselves, civil rights, women's rights, etc. It was also the birthplace of the anti-smoking movement, and who would have ever thought when I was growing up that in my adult lifetime I would see no smoking in bars in Paris or New York City. It is also the birthplace of the universal accessibility movement, and who would have thought that public buildings, at least in my home state of California, would all be publicly handicap accessible. So I mentioned these things now, and you can find many examples of cities that have had the courage to legislate change. And I will never understand why politicians are so chicken. For example, if you know that plastic bags are bad for the environment, how hard is it to say, you've got 1 year to buy yourself some cloth bags? No more plastic bags in the city. So I'm an extreme optimist about being able to change people's values and, importantly, being able to change people's behaviors. And I think part of what that takes is courage on the part of legislators to simply say, this is what we're going to do. And the public, I believe, will follow along. So, on that optimistic
Thank
note.
you. There we have optimism. We like
One
that.
brief comment on the bags. In Toronto, actually, Mayor Ford, yesterday, he took, I don't know if it was yesterday or today, he brought to council a motion. In Toronto, you gotta pay 5 cents per bag. And he wanted to eliminate the 5 cents. And the city council turned against him and said, instead of eliminating the 5 cents, we're gonna eliminate the plastic bags. So Toronto will not have any plastic bags as of 2013.
More optimism. Thank you. Ladies
And
and
one
gentlemen.
small anecdote about spice cities or spiceless cities. No, because this has very much to do, you have so much in common with cities like San Francisco. Yesterday I had lunch with the people from Twitter and Google. Well, Twitter is opening their new headquarters in San Francisco this Friday, right in the heart of the city on Market Square. And people like Google, they have to fund dozens and dozens of buses to bus their senior staff from San Francisco to the Google headquarters, because despite the fact that they have this beautiful campus and neighborhoods and whatever, people don't want to live there because those areas, the neighborhoods around the Google headquarters are very spiceless. So they want to go to the Spice San Francisco, so that's...
Thank you, and we just have one more, and we are done.
It's a plug, and it follows from Shauna Sylvester. You want to continue the discussion? Go to the Carbon Talks website. Go to mine, price tags. We've just put up the discussion paper that we had and the conversation, the dialogue that we had yesterday. It's about density, and we'd love you to participate. So if you want to continue this discussion that Sam has sparked, we welcome that. I'm sure we won't be the only ones.
I will
Again,
give a
thanks.
hearty endorsement to price tags.
Okay, so no, this is very quick. I always like to end a talk by saying, what is the one thing that you would feel like you can actually do to make some change? And I would hope you actually might try to act upon that.
Very good. Okay, one year ago, I said to Lynn, I really would love to introduce people to these wonderful minds that have been influencing me. And it's, she's been worrying and working the whole time. We've been having meetings at our place with all these volunteers and people that are helping us. And so there's been such a lot of people that have contributed to make this happen. I'm especially grateful to the team, all the speakers, every one of you who have come and spent your day here. Especially to Lynn, if I might, who has done so much work on this. So thank everybody that's contributed to this, and thank you, and I hope that this will help change your minds and help change Vancouver and change other cities so that we can be more sustainable. Thank you.